As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Well, welcome listeners to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we share tools and information that can help you drink more mindfully. My name is Derek Brown, and I'm an NASM certified wellness coach, an award-winning bartender, and author of Mindful Mixology, a comprehensive guide to no and low alcohol cocktails. And what I have not shared in previous podcasts, which I'll share now, is I'm also a bit of a TV buff. And so one of my favorite shows is actually a show that I watched when I was growing up called Cheers. Now, it's really not surprising at all that a bartender would like Cheers because it's about a pub or a bar in Boston. And all of these sort of familiar characters come into it. And they, are there day after day, week after week. And in fact, it feels like they spend their whole lives there, and we get to see their lives unfurl. And one of the most memorable characters is a Dr. Frasier Crane. Now, Dr. Frasier Crane is a psychologist and a little bit of an aesthete. So he's always, talking about opera and wine and sort of the quote unquote finer things in life. But he spends a lot of time in the bar. I mean, a lot of time. And so it seems to me, at least my theory is that in the show, he's avoiding something, right? And so he has a wife named Lilith, also a psychologist, who is a little bit more cold and calculating, maybe not quite a warm character. And you can see in the show that they've got some problems. And so I guess I kind of think maybe that's the thing he's avoiding his home life. Now, again, I'm a bartender, not a psychologist. So this is just my theory of the show. But it really got me thinking and, kind of a little bit about my own life and avoidance. The fact is that he's in the bar every day, which is probably more than anybody should be, let alone a psychologist. And he's, avoiding something at his home life, Lilith, whatever it is. And that's something that I feel like I kind of did as well. Now, I wrote that book, Mindful Mixology. I shared that. And mostly it's about recipes and how to make non-alcoholic cocktails. But I also talk a little bit about my experience with alcohol. And in that, I mentioned this part, that alcohol was a way for me to escape parts of my life and my feelings. And so I shared, being drunk, I could live in a fantasy world and didn't have to consider the repercussions of my actions or the low idling engine of anxiety anymore. I was living in that drunken moment, free of concern, even if that moment was wobbly, blurry, and soon forgotten. Well, had I read this book beforehand, A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters, I might have done something differently. Because in this book, and we're going to, by Dr. Stephen Hayes, we're going to talk to him in just a moment, he talks about running towards the dinosaur, which we're going to ask him about. I'm not going to explain. But in a sense, it's kind of maybe going head on towards your problems. And I think that would have helped me a lot. And really, in a way, when I changed my relationship with alcohol, I didn't necessarily feel better. And you hear that a lot. You hear people talking about how your skin's going to glow, you're going to get great sleep, all your relationships are repaired. Well, maybe that happens for some people. And statistically, there's some truth to the skin and sleep, I think. But realistically, the gift that I got from changing my relationship with alcohol was the opportunity to see myself a little more clearly, which in a way helped me live a more rich and fulfilling life. So that was something I really love, and I think that is shared in this book a liberated mind, but there's a lot more. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Hayes, who is the founder of ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Theory. He has 48 books and over 700 scientific papers. I don't know how anybody could write that much, but he's obviously very talented and one of the most cited psychologists in the world. So I'm really honored and fascinated and can't wait to get the conversation. Dr. Hayes, welcome.
Well, thanks. Super interested in seeing where this goes.
Yeah, me too. Well, the first thing I got to ask you is something related to Dr. Crane that we mentioned. Again, a fictional psychologist. Have you ever seen the show Cheers?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, and I want to get more into your personal story, some of that too. But first, I kind of want to start out with this idea. Dr. Crane is like this prototypical psychologist, and he is psychoanalyst, Freudian in orientation, I think. I don't really remember all of it, but it seems that is a kind of psychology that maybe is a little different from what ACT is. And so I wanted to see if I could just start out by saying, in juxtaposition or just in your own words, how does ACT differ from that?
Well, it's a little more direct, I think simpler. We've spent 40 years trying to hack the human mind and figure out the smallest set of things that do the most good. And then noticing the things that create problems. And you said in your setup that, in part, you were drinking to feel better. And we come into the world yearning to feel, and we need to do a better job of feeling. So yeah, we need to feel better, but we need to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
But once we're kind of categorizing our own insides as a problem to be solved, it looks like we should feel just the good stuff. Well, that means only partially just part of what's happening, and you dumb yourself down. There's a lot of wisdom to be learned from understanding what's painful, and there's really important and sweet moments that are painful. If somebody you love dies, it's time to feel sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but your mind's so stupid. It'll say, oh, I don't like feeling sad and would rather drink or avoid or stay in a bar and have a little bit of fun talking to your friends without facing a difficult relationship, as you guessed with the Cheers character.
Yeah. And when you mentioned the pain part, one of the points that really I was just blown away by in the book, there's many, many things. As you can see, I always do this. I mark up all the books, but this one has more than most. When you talk about pain as a flashlight, I just thought that was really powerful. So tell me a little bit how you got to this theory, ACT.
Well, I was working on sort of what happens with mental rules making us rigid and narrow. And then I had the great blessing, didn't recognize it at the time, but developing a panic disorder. And over 3 years just spun into deeper and deeper and deeper hole, trying the best I can not to feel so overwhelmed with anxiety that I couldn't function. I had things to do. I'd teach classes and so forth, but it's pretty hard to do where you're having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so I did, but as I say, the logical, reasonable, sensible, pathological things that everybody does: run away, hide, diminish, dampen down, drug it down, avoid it. And of course, it just grew and grew. And it wasn't until I kind of hit bottom in that process that I found some wisdom there it's in all of us. We know not to do what we do that creates problems, but the organ between our ears doesn't know it. And if you can find that hitting bottom moment, the way it's talked about often when people have problems with drinking, it gives you the opportunity to go in a new direction. And that happened to me. And I've been on a 40-year journey now trying to understand that, put it into other people's lives.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I really think that, I myself have had sort of psychotic episodes. I'm actually bipolar disorder, which isn't always correlated with the psychotic episodes, but I have, and I guess it might be similar to a panic episode in a way, as this kind of loss of reality in a way, and this sort of, but I wonder, I wonder how you turn that around? Like it sounds like you found some pretty powerful tools. And I know that you mentioned, I mentioned this in my intro, running towards the dinosaur. Can you explain
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Well, that story came because you know, a lot of us had nightmares when we were kids, and I did, and nightmares of dinosaurs chasing me, and I'd run, 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 run. And somewhere in there, when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, I had a lucid dream where I thought, when the dinosaur catches me, I wake up.
Hmm.
And I spun around in the dream, and I ran towards the dinosaur, jumped in its mouth, and woke up. And then the next night, I remembered the same thing, and I did it again, and then again, and then the dinosaurs didn't want to play anymore. I just didn't have the nightmares. Well, somewhere in the, bottom of a 3-year spin into panic disorder, when I really felt as though I had no way out, that, I was even wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack, and in this case, la final one, thinking I was having a heart attack, and then
Wow.
realizing, no, it's just another deeper level of panic. And somewhere in there, it occurred to me that I should run towards the dinosaur. And I had almost an out-of-body experience. I explained it in a TEDx talk, but literally said, basically, kill me if you're gonna.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, most people who struggle with panic have moments like that. And almost instantly, the fog lifts, you start showing up, but then the mind does the stupid thing. It says, okay, so if I say, kill me if you're gonna, then it's gonna go away, and I want it to go away, so I'm gonna pretend as though I don't want it to go away so that it'll go away. Dude, you can't trick yourself. You know what's going on. And so then even these spontaneous things where people do find a way to sort of open up instead of closing down turns into another form of closing down. And so we've worked for these 4 decades to try to come up with what are all the things you need around that move to make it possible. And you need to rein in judgment. You need to show up in the present. You need to find a part of you that's more spiritual and witnessing and noticing, so you have a foundation to stand on. And then you better do all that for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you end up with selfish forms of mindfulness. How does that help the world? So what are you going to do with that greater openness? And can you put that into your habits, your relationships? And oh, by the way, take care of your body. What I just said is basically everything we know in psychology about how change happens. And I can prove that in analyses we've done on all the studies ever done in the history of the world that properly measured why did it work. And it took us 3 years to do it. So I'm here, talking about ACT, but really what I'm saying is, can we learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living, and putting that into our relationships and taking care of our body? If you do that, life will open up. And if you don't, it'll close down.
That's a beautiful way to put it. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast. My name is Derek Brown, and we're talking to Dr. Stephen Hayes, renowned psychologist, about ACT and many other things, dinosaurs too. So we'll get right back to it. I think that in that you kind of were touching on something that was really important to me in this book and in my life is values work. So mindful, let's put a bookmark on that, because obviously we have to talk about that at some point. Otherwise, why would we name this the Mindful Drinking Podcast? But in terms of the values work, I found that really interesting because I don't think I've heard that usually when I come across therapy, right? That it's about working through your values. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, boy, is it important, again, we're finding it in the research that we're doing now, and we're really looking at what happens when you put mindfulness in people's lives. And in the wisdom traditions from which we get that, not just the Eastern traditions, all of the major religions, Judaism, Christianity, etc., have these kind of more mystical and mindful wings. They all do. And but if you have that part of it, which is to be open and aware in the present, basically, if it's not put to a purpose, you end up with selfish mindfulness. You take care of the kids. I got to go meditate. What? Now if you did that in a mindfulness retreat, the teacher might, give you a poke and say, go do the dishes.
Right.
But we've put it into the Western world in a way that's not always wise. And so the whole purpose of being open and aware is so that you can live a life worth living.
Mhm.
It isn't just so that you can do whatever feels good in a different way. That's more of the same. And so, but values are, don't make them into a big spooky thing. It's just your gut sense of what brings vitality and meaning to you in your life. It's why you look up to your heroes. It's why you say, oh, this was such a sweet moment. It's what's on the other side of the painful things that happen. If you're betrayed, it's because you want loyalty. Duh. Yeah, but your mind will say, if you're betrayed, well, I can never trust anyone again. Dude, how are you going to have intimate, loyal, committed relationships doing that? Well, you can't. So the mind will solve the problem by trying to eliminate the value that made the thing painful in the first place. So it's tricky because we're trying to treat our lives as a problem to be solved instead of a process to be lived. And
Hmm.
values are like that lighthouse in the distance. No matter how much you pursue them, you're never finished.
Wow.
If you want to be more loving, it isn't like, boy, I've done enough. Now it's time to hurt people.
Hmm.
No, how much loving you do, there's more loving to do. And so in the same way, let's take on board all of that wisdom from our past experience, being open to our pain from the past, etc., but come into the present. And now look at that lighthouse, and one step at a time, walk in that direction, knowing that you're never going to get there. You're not going to be the Dalai Lama or Nelson Mandela, or no, but you can do better today than you did yesterday.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. And I guess that in a way why I've seen you refer to it as sort of process-based therapy. Is that right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's what that is a shift. So instead of trying to think that, oh, you got a latent disease and you need to be fixed, which is mostly a fantasy, even the folks who developed all those diagnoses that we learn, and even our young people are coming in to therapy sessions with, oh, I have this and I have this and I have this and I have this. And I'm going like, what are you doing? How about
yeah.
that? Um, even the folks who developed that, the American Psychiatric Association, et cetera, say that actually, while we're trying to find the diseases, we haven't found any yet.
Hmm.
None. Not even the psychotic disorders are not yet classified as diseases. They're syndromes. They're just collections of things people see and say. That's it. Well, okay, so how are we going to move forward more rapidly after spending almost half a century trying to find the diseases? I would say instead, let's focus on the things that happen in our body and our relationships and in our psychology. The biopsychosocial, you want to use a geek word,
Mhm.
that are steps that can be taken that move you forward.
Yeah.
And it turns out when you do that, it really simplifies. You need to learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living, extending that to your relationships and taking care of your body. The end. I can say it in a freaking sentence.
Huh.
Well, you can learn it, and we all learn it. And guess what? Life will teach you. If you
Yeah.
look at the wisdom that has happened to you in your life, the things that when you look back, when I learned from this, I bet you learn to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living, taking care of relationships in your body. I bet you did
Yep.
in one small way or another. Like you're drinking too much, you're hurting your body. You know that. You're running away from your feelings. That has a cost. You know that. Not being open in your relationships, narrowed, etc. But the problem is that this organ doesn't know it because
Yeah.
it's constantly trying to treat you like a math problem instead of a sunset.
Hmm.
It's constantly shoving you into, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. Like a bad cell phone commercial.
Hmm.
And, so could we get with the wisdom within?
Wow.
Everybody listening to me has that wisdom. I can actually prove it to you in 2 minutes. You give
Well,
me 2 minutes.
I'll take that. Let's do it. Can you prove it to me in 2 minutes?
All right, I'll prove it to you in 2 minutes. Pick somebody who powerfully lifted you up in your life that you actually know about. Anybody, teacher. parent,
Mhm.
sibling, lover, friend, coach, anybody.
Yeah, I can think
When
of
you were
some.
with them, did you feel as though they were present with you consciously? Could you see a human being when those eyes met?
Yeah.
And were the opportunities that showed up in the moment or was it always one way, or the highway, or is it more flexible here? And did when you were with this person, were you constantly judged? Were you
No.
being criticized? I
Mhm.
bet you not. And did the things you care about matter to that person? Would they ask you to do something that would violate what you deeply cared about?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
And did you feel deeply accepted for who you are as a person? Did somehow you feel like you're okay in the
Yeah.
eyes of that person?
That's right.
I've just asked you 6 questions, and they are basically, was that person more open, aware, and actively engaged with you? Did values and fitting behavior to the opportunity of the moment that fits that? Were they present consciously with you in the moment? And did you feel accepted for who you are or constantly judged? Those are the features of open, aware, and actively engaged. Here's what I'm saying. You look up to, in the personal heroes that guide you in your life, not just the ones with the big house or the money, but the ones that you really want as a guide. You look up to them because they are more psychologically flexible. That's the word we use for those sets. You gravitate towards it. You're like, oh, I want that. Yeah. Yeah, we do want that because
Yeah.
it fulfills a basic yearning. And life is asking you, okay, can you peel off all these layers of the onion and get down to this more wisdom core that allows you to live a life that's whole and free? Even with a chatterbox in your head, it's constantly criticizing you, constantly telling you not to feel, constantly telling you you're not good enough. I mean, you treat yourself when you brush your teeth in a way that person you just thought of would never treat you.
That's true.
Why? What are you doing? You're doing what humans do. But so my point being, you got wisdom within. That hero you just thought of, that guide, isn't here physically sitting by you. It's in your head.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about taking those things that you gravitate towards
Hmm.
and putting them into your life?
Wow.
They're already in your head. You know where to find them. And that book is all about how to find them and put them into your life.
That's fantastic. Now, you kind of touched on a couple things. One is how the mind can be so cruel. Like I remember this comedian being heckled, and him saying something to the effect of, "There's nothing that you could say to me that I haven't said to myself in the mirror that's much worse." And sometimes I feel like that too. But I think that you gave a name to that, and there is obviously even an exercise around that. But you gave a name to that as the dictator
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
Could you share more about the dictator within?
Yeah, we all have that voice within, and it starts arguing, and we have multiple voices, but there's one of those voices that is very critical. And, even 4-year-olds understand, goofy with horns on one shoulder and goofy with a halo on the other. You start arguing with yourself right about that age. And if you just walk around, if you were to say to yourself, like, I'm really an okay person,
Hmm.
there'll be a tiny little whisper that say, yeah, except for this, or no, you're not. Well, if they knew about that, oh my goodness, they would never think what do you mean? Don't you remember the time you did this and this and this and this? Just slow it down and listen. And that little voice can sometimes turn into something like, Night on Bald Mountain, something out of the Wizard of Oz that's telling you will only be able to begin a journey of being whole and free and lovable and who you really are after you correct this and 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 then you don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that advice is stupid. If you try to do it, you'll pay the cost, because it's basically saying when you're different, you can start.
Hmm.
How do I start from here? You can't start from here. You have to be different first. What? It's an impossible situation.
It
How
is.
about if we start from here? And how about if we do it in a way that doesn't, cut ourselves out off at the knees before we even run the race? Where how about the possibility that we are whole and free human beings now with a chatterbox in our head and a voice that even claims to be us,
Hmm.
that dictator within voice, that we can learn to sort of put on a leash. It'll still keep talking, but if it's talking up here versus over here, the difference is I can still see you. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that thought. I have that memory of that betrayal, that thing I did I'm ashamed of. I'm not going to tell anybody. And
Right.
in fact, I'll go to my grave with it. You got things like that. I bet you. At least
Yeah.
one or two or three, maybe a few more.
Yeah.
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 Okay, it'll be there. But it doesn't have to be here. And if over here, I can look at you, we can have a conversation. I can create a life. Come on with me. It's okay. It's okay. And I even want it to come with you because inside that is wisdom.
Yeah.
Don't do that again. Okay, I won't. I'm not going to lie and cheat. I'm not going to hurt my body in that way. I'm not going to inject that thing in my veins again. I'm not going to, you can take your history with you and learn from it. Don't you
Right.
want to? Do you want to be as stupid as you were when you were young?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, one of the first times I came across ACT and you was with self-management and recovery training, or SMART, which is a program that helps people in recovery in terms of self-management. It has some features like Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's a little different. You lead the process, and it doesn't have necessarily a religious component, although a spiritual component to it could be certainly welcomed. But I think that in it, they talked about things like universal life acceptance, universal self-acceptance, and
Yeah.
universal other acceptance, all of which are really, really hard for me. But I think that what's there is obviously part of ACT is, that's part of ACT, but that's also part of the recovery. So it seems like ACT has been studied alongside recovery and is something that can be helpful. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we've done a number of studies, allying ACT with things in the recovery tradition, and that's true in drug and alcohol. We also done it over in serious mental illness and things like that. And here, look, if you want to give somebody something really precious, occasionally out of your mouth, let's say like your grandmother's ring to your bride to be, you might give it with these words: "Here, would you accept this?" You do that. You've heard it. You've seen it. Life is asking you this. You've got this precious gift of wisdom within. It's hard won, man. You've made mistakes. You've really so life's saying, "Here, would you accept this?" And the precious ring is wisdom. It's learning. It's like, oh, okay, which helps you find a path, find a way to recover, to move ahead. Well, that combination of accepting the wisdom that's offered by your own painful experience, bringing it into the current moment, seeing how it applies, focus on what's important, get your feet moving, and take care of relationships in your body. That's exactly the formula that we call psychological flexibility that's in that book. But, if I could just say a little geek science, just 60 seconds, we
Please,
look
yeah.
at every single study ever done in the history of the world that tried to figure out not just did this method work using all the geek randomized trials, blah, 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 but why did it work? And that requires some special stats and taking measures. And we summarize that entire literature, the entire world's literature in any language with any method for any mental or behavioral health outcome. And here's what it said. You can basically summarize it all. Learn to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in life worth living, taking care of your relationships and your body. Okay, If you know that, if the science shows that, if your own life history shows that, look, dude, if you're sitting there saying, I'm not sure it applies to me, go look again. When you did the hide thing or the fight thing with your own history, did you feel empowered or did you feel diminished? I bet you felt diminished. You felt
I
alone.
did. Yeah,
Okay.
very much
And
so.
when you opened up and showed up and connected with others and connected with what brings meaning and purpose to your life and putting that into your life, into your work, into your relationships, did you feel lifted up? You did.
I did. Yeah.
So you've been doing it, you know it by the heroes you pick. Can you just learn how to get the little skills going so you can start putting in your life more deliberately?
Yeah.
You do that with your physical health. Do you go to the gym? Yes, you do.
Yeah.
How
I go
about
to a skate park. I skateboard. That's my gym. But
they're awesome. Yeah, I love it. And just some amazing skateboarders who weigh into even my age, right? And there's a lot to learn with it. And sometimes you need to lean down the hill. If you lean back, you're on your ass.
Yeah.
A little scary on a steep slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Life will give you that. You need to eat skills to stay in balance, right? Because you're constantly falling off the skateboard. If you slow it down in slow motion, you'll see but you're making micro adjustments.
Right.
Okay, so things are happening in your life that are bouncing you off the skateboard of life. Can you adjust? Your mind tells you you're not good enough. Can you adjust? Somebody just criticized you. Can you adjust? And then if you're going to be skateboarding, you better know that down is more important than up. If you just want to go up, 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 you know what's going to happen? You'll go halfway up and then you'll fall backwards.
That's right.
No, if you're skateboarding, down is more important than up.
Yeah.
That's like values. I know going in this direction is more important than that direction.
Yeah.
Like creating relationships that are worth having are more important than me being, narcissistically the wonderful one, for example.
Yeah.
Even though in good relationships, people appreciate me. Oh, that's kind of nice. Yeah. But if you try to do that constantly, I'm the great one. I'm the one that you need. I'll make your group great again, whatever. No, that's going to make you go up instead of down, when down is what you need to do on that skateboard of life, if you use that metaphor. So it's all around you. It's in you, but your mind doesn't know it, never will, because it's the problem-solving organ. And this is not what we're talking about. This is the living process, the journey. Tricky.
Amazing.
Human.
Well, you're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast. Derek Brown. We're with Dr. Stephen Hayes, and we're talking about ACT, and we're talking about skateboarding, one of my favorite subjects, as a metaphor in this case. But I'm going to bring it back to skateboarding for a second, because I actually skateboarded when I was 16 years old, and then I gave it up for a very long time. And my son wanted to pick up skateboarding, so I decided that I was going to do it with him. And I always kind of identified as a skateboarder, even though I had long given up the practice of it. And so I started doing it again in my 40s. And I will tell you that at first I was very, very concerned about what other people thought, because I did feel a little awkward. All of the people at the skate parks were younger and certainly cooler and definitely better. But I think that the thing that led me to be a better skater more than anything was thinking about it in terms of what we'd call soul skating, which means just giving up the idea that I have to do anything right. All I have to do is follow it the way that I want to do it and enjoy myself. And then shortly after that, I recognized that that's what a lot of people were doing. In fact, people embrace that. Even the person that was super complicated, doing all the great tricks, they were clapping their board when I did some silly trick that was just good enough for me. And so I found a community out of that, and people really are my friends to this day, which is great. So I can definitely see the wisdom in what you're saying. And it sounds like that wisdom applies a lot to recovery. And I wonder if we could talk about it a little bit. I said we're going to put a bookmark in this, talk about it in a little bit in terms of mindful drinking, because recovery is one thing. And maybe it's there's a continuum, but on one side of it is severe substance use disorder, and the other side of it is somebody who's maybe struggling through peer pressure or conformity or habit. And I think that person is looking at the term mindful drinking. I think, how can I apply mindful toward this? And I think you shared a little bit about that, but I wonder if you could add on top of that.
Yeah, and let me link it over to what we were just talking about with skateboarding and this point that, you have an opportunity to learn the skills that are going to be useful in so many different areas so often. And mindful drinking is like a great preparation. It's like going to the skateboard park, that you don't go there when you're sick and your body's broken down and finally, I guess I need to go to the gym or I need to go to the skateboard. No, you do that to be able to learn how to be flexible, how to be strong, how to make those kind of moves. Okay, so what would the gym be where you'd go? It might actually be how you handle this issue of drinking in a mindful way. Mm-hmm. That's a kind of life gym. Okay, so what am I going to practice in the gym here? Well, one of the things you might practice is, how do we take the small steps, as you're just saying, that move you learned on the skateboard, that's the small steps that move you towards how you want to be as a conscious whole person. Mindfulness sounds spooky. It sounds like, oh God, I got to sit on the pillow for no, it means being less entangled with judgment, not avoiding, showing up in the present moment consciously. And in that present moment, being able to allocate attention in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary, and linked to what you really want to do. So that means broadening and narrowing and shifting and staying on what you're looking at consciously, but also allowing these echoes of your history in so that you don't say, oh, but I don't remember that. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to think that. Now you're no longer even present. You're off in your head. You're in the past. You're somewhere else. No, come into the present.
Yeah.
It has all these wonderful opportunities. I mean, what are the opportunities? Well, it depends on the situation. It might be a conversation. It might be companionship. It might be just relaxation. And, in that context, the drinking with or without alcohol in this context or that could fit into a life that's expanding. It's fitting how you want to be with yourself as an imbalance, back to the skateboard, person who's learning skills that will be useful more generally. These skills that we're talking about, this, that I've repeated several times, are there in this conversation. Yeah. They're there when you go to work in the morning, and they're there also when you're looking at how do I want to handle drinking? Handle it mindfully.
Yeah.
Open up, show up, see what's possible, and do what works. What works towards what? Towards how you really want to be. And one step at a time, you'll acquire greater skills. So I'm mixing several metaphors in there, but I kind of like the idea of thinking of the challenge of mindful drinking as kind of like the challenge of a skateboard park or lifting weights in the gym or a yoga class or maybe saying hello to your wife, and repairing an argument you had yesterday.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can tell you that for sure, with skateboarding and drinking too much, falling down is definitely a possibility in each one. So that definitely is part of it. And it sounds like you've made a wonderful group of metaphors here, which I hope our listeners can entangle, but I think they can, because it's very clear what you're saying overall. I'm so grateful for all this, because I think it's just really helpful to think about that being present, because I think that especially in drinking, that's one of the things that matters most to me, right? Like when I go to a bar, it sounds like I'm going for a quote unquote cocktail, right? But I'm not really. And as a bartender, I always knew that. Like, sure, it should be a good cocktail. If it's not a good cocktail, then it's going to interrupt your experience, and you're going to be thinking, what, did I pay for this? What is this? But if it's, it's not really about the drink. It's about the interaction. It's about the connection with people. It's about the way that we feel when we're close to somebody, which I think is, to me, a far more valuable thing than, feeling a little tipsy or drunk. Although it's up to everyone to make their own decisions around that. But I certainly love that, being present and how you can apply that within a context of drinking, whether it's cocktails with or without alcohol. So I think that's a fantastic statement.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And that social context is, deeply built into so many of the things we do because we're the social primates, and yeah, you said you got to make your choices, not saying you have to be like this or have to be like that. There are some people who are far more introverted and just, yeah, but even so, people yearn to connect with others. And so finding a context where you can do that and do that in a way that's not hurtful to yourself or others, that's great. And if you found that, you have fallen off the board, fallen off the wagon, okay, well, let's see if we can get that adjusted. And, I think that there's a one size fits all thing that sometimes has happened when drinking gets problematic, and I understand the heart of that. And there's maybe even some utility to it, but, a lot of people know it's correcting course and finding a pattern that really fits how you want to be in life. And you may be able to adjust in different ways where you're, moderating your drinking and doing it in a way that's fits how you want to be and that is healthy still for your body, but allows you to have those social contacts.
Yeah. There's this one thing that I really like to do. It's an exercise from Qigong. I'm a big fan of Qigong, and it's sort of just standing still with your feet together and then just paying attention to the adjustments that your feet are taking to just make sure you're standing still. And if you really take time to do it, it's amazing just how many things are happening to keep you upright. And I found that it helps me a lot with skateboarding and balance, since we're talking about balance. So
can I give you one that I've been working on that's very similar? And I love this metaphor you're using. In fact, I'm writing a new book that's more like a liberated mind book, but more directly kind of self-help. I wrote one that was my 5 minutes of fame. Get out of your mind into your life was written up in Time magazine, beat Harry Potter for one whole week. Woohoo! Still sells well, but it's 20 years ago, and I'm trying to update it. And in that book is this exercise, which I've been doing myself. Just stand on one foot. You can put the other foot either out or wrapped around the back, and just see how long you can go. And over time, you'll get longer and longer. Now do this. Close your eyes. Almost instantly, you fall over.
Yeah.
Boom. Okay, so then blur your eyes and then close your eyes. You're still going to fall over. Practice it. If you're standing in line at a grocery store or something, as long as you can grab something and don't fall over, literally.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen is these sensations in your feet and this proprioceptive sensations, you don't realize you're relying on your visual system so much, but it's huge. So much so if you close your eyes, fall over. Why would you? Come on. Because you haven't really dialed into some important information that's there.
Yep.
And you can learn to do, just like people who are not sighted.
Right.
They can hear where they are by the echoes off the walls and so forth. You don't normally have to navigate the world that way.
Yeah.
Because you have sight, most people listening. And the same thing with people who have hearing impairments and so forth. These channels shut down. Shut down one deliberately and then practice it just for fun. Just fun. It doesn't mean anything. It's not going to ever be useful, except it is useful as a metaphor.
Wow.
And it may even, it actually might help you with skateboarding. I don't know. It's possible because it's one of those weird gym exercises that really good coaches know how to do, where you dial into a specific muscle, a specific thing. My son's getting his second black belt. His final QE is coming up a week from now.
Wow, cool.
He was born with a muscle disorder, supposedly, where supposedly he would never be able to do anything physical. So I'm so proud of how many thousands of hours he's put into that to get to that point. And I look at what the coaches do. And if you work with a good coach, that is that dial it right in. Well, how about mental coaching? How about if we include mental coaching even in our physical coaching, and that we take the opportunity to look at all these great learning opportunities, whether it's a bar or a relation to talk with your spouse, or doing a podcast, and then play around a little bit with some of these skills, but staying in balance. I love your metaphor, and maybe I've given you one you can actually practice and try that is really fun and takes a while. It'll take a long while before you can keep your eyes closed for 30 seconds and then 40. And then
Well, I'm going to definitely give it a try. And, I promised you a 45-minute conversation, and we've already gone over, so I'm just going to leave it there, but say that, this conversation, I know it would be valuable, and it exceeded my expectations. Such an incredible book, by the way, such incredible 47 other books that I've got to read, and now you're adding another one on it. I'm sure you'll get to 50 minimum. There's no way that you could leave it at 49.
yeah, I got them coming. If the deities give me the time, I'll get there.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hayes. I really appreciate you joining us. And where can we learn more about you or find out more about you?
If people just find something I'm saying interesting, just remember my name. It's Stephen C. Charlie, my middle initial Hayes, but all one word, Stephen C. Hayes. So www.stephenchayes.com. If you click on yes, please send it to. I'll put you on my newsletter list. About every month I send it out. I don't spam people. It's one click to get out. And if that doesn't fit, look, Google psychological flexibility or ACT. There's a lot of free resources out there. Explore it and see if it isn't relevant to the stuff you're dealing with.
Absolutely. That's an absolute must. Right now, if you're listening, start Googling right after this so you could learn some more. Thank you again. And we look forward to hearing more from you.